Okay, well, welcome for those that are visitors here. This is a discussion class for the life of Jesus. We have been on the Sermon on the Mount for this will be our 6th week. And I don't think we have any announcements. Marge is not here for the 2nd week in a row. Visiting somebody that she knows that she's related to or went to, or dated or went to church with or taught school to her. She's got it all out. We love Marge. Does anyone not have a harmony? Please raise your hand. We'll be glad for you to and keep it, take it home with you. We have plenty. We'll get started. We're still in the Sermon on the Mount. So Dr. Cosgrove, would you have our prayer, please?
Father, thank you again for bringing us together to study your word and to study this very important part of Scripture. Help our lesson today guide our lives into the future, into this next week and beyond. Be with our teacher as he speaks through you and with you. In your name we ask, God.
I can't thank the people who've helped me carry on this class every week. Basically, some weeks I'm really not doing very much. Abner is my right arm. He keeps this class going video-wise. Everything that's happening in this room, Abner's responsible for. And I've been very, very grateful to have him as I call him my boy. I was called down, you can't call people your boy anymore. And so I came back with my classic line, you need to get over it. Abner's my boy. Amen. So anyway, thank you, Gordon, for passing these out. Yeah. Good morning. How are you? I'm Kent. Well, good to see you. Hi. Thanks for coming. We're in the life of Jesus. This book is just a compilation of the Gospels. They're in chronological order. There's nothing left in the book other than just what's in the 4 Gospels. And today we're on page 60. Page 60. And we're in Matthew 7, 1 through 29. And before we get going, if I can get my I missed it. But anyway, today we're going to really be talking a lot about judging, how we judge things. Every day in our lives, we have to make a judgment about where we're going, a judgment about a doctor, a judgment about a child, a judgment about a school, a judgment at Publix, a judgment about what we're going to have. You know, it's a constant judgment in our lives. And we're going to talk a lot today about that. But I just want to share something with you. This is the 6th week on the Sermon on the Mount. And during these weeks, if you start back on page here, let's see what page we started on. I think it's page 56. It's section 54 started the Sermon on the Mount. And I just wanted you to kind of think for a minute. This is our 6th week. Has something stuck with you? Has something impressed you more than the other things about this particular talk that Jesus gave? It's one of the most important dialogues in the Bible. We see it here, blessed are the poor, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart. We talked about the salt of the earth. We talked about, did I come to abolish the law? No, I came to fulfill it. Anything jump out at you that you've been taking out of here that stuck with? Yes, sir.
It seemed to me that most significant for me, as kind of a new way of looking at it, was that this is a picture of heaven.
It is. How about my Zoom friends? Anything has come up and stuck with you the last 5 weeks? This is our 6th week. Anything that has come into your mind?
Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so we are very proud of our nationalities, of our citizenships. You know, if you're from a certain country, there are things that are very distinguishable about you. If you're from the US or from India or from a specific country in Africa, there is something that distinguishes you from that nation. Here, Jesus is trying to establish what distinguishes the citizens of his kingdom. So, in other words, I want you to be genuine citizens of my kingdom. And so that's what has emphasized in me again, how genuine I am. Am I a true citizen of his kingdom?
Thank you. Very, very nice comment. Yes.
Also, everything that was said prior to this, but also you are the salt of the earth and you are the light of the world.
Yeah. Very nice. Yeah, I had the privilege of leading the class on the salt of the earth. Remember what he said about when it loses its saltiness? If you're not really, you lose your flavor. They use you for Roundup to kill grass. They throw you on a pass so the grass won't grow. You're not good for seasoning anymore. So people just walk on you. You're a Roundup. You kill grass. And I thought that was very interesting. Anyone else?
Doug and Ken, this is Roy. What I see in the Beatitudes is a signpost of spiritual growth in our journey to become more like Christ. And so we start with poor in spirit and we grow from there until we get thirsty and hungry for his word. And then we become pure in heart and we are ready for what God is asking us to accomplish and what he created us for.
Thank you, Roy. That's great. That's great. Yes.
Eduardo, do you have a comment? His microphone is unmuted, so I thought I'd better check.
Okay. One thing that's impressed me in my life today, I'm supposed to be slowing down, and my life is speeding up. It's supposed to be at my age. But more projects, more deals, more this, more that. And I've told you this before, I thought when I reached this age, I would be much wiser and calmer and more patient. I'm not. It's just the opposite. I see people making the same old mistakes and I try to rein them in and I'm finding out I can't control everything. I'm gonna have to start letting go. I'm having a little plaque made. It's a printer next door to my office on 8th Street. And I'm gonna have this put on my wall and it says, "Blessed are the merciful." That's it. I need to look at that every day. I need to be thinking about being a little more merciful in my life. And people say, "Oh, you're a good guy." Yeah, you don't know what's going on in my mind sometimes. You can't read my mind when I'm nodding my head and smiling at you. I need to be far more merciful than I am now. Far more. And a couple of things that, if there's anyone else before I give you my take on a couple of things other than merciful. Anyone else? Doug talked last week about show-offs. The Pharisees were showing off by praying in the street, and when they gave money, they wanted to make sure you heard the big rattle of the coins, and they wanted to be seen. I was thinking about a man I met when I was in my early 30s, when I was in the carpet business, and I was selling the carpet, and I knew that I needed to be there when the carpet was delivered to get my money. I didn't have really hardly any money, and if one hiccup with this guy, I would be in trouble. And you know who he is, Alan, so I'm not going to call his name. He was on South 41, always had the flashy car, and in his office, he had an aerial shot of his home. Now, nobody had aerials, we didn't have Google Earth. You had to hire a pilot or a helicopter pilot to go up and take a shot of this big Ponderosa he had, and he had all his cars out in this big driveway. Remember Dallas, that moved to him? Well, he had that kind of setup with and all the cars. Well, he had this little lady that worked for him who never said much. And I would always be kind of pacing the floors, waiting for him to show up to write the check. Her name was Helen, and you've seen this lady 1,000 times. She's short, she's overweight, she has black hair, she has the glasses with a chain. She has a mole right here with black hair growing out of it. And, you know, I got so uncomfortable that day waiting on this guy to show up. I said, oh, I need to talk to this lady. And I'm looking at this big aerial phone. I said, Helen, do you, I guess you have a big home like this? She said, no, my home's in heaven. My home. And at this point in my life, I was not really willing to talk about heaven. And I've just really never forgotten that. I saw the guy that years later, I saw this guy and I said, how you been? He was very friendly. He's a good guy. And I said, what about Helen? He said, she quit me. And I've been calling her every month, trying to get her to come back and work for me. She won't come back. And I'm thinking, well, now she probably won't. She has a different home in mind for the future. We're going to talk about judgment calls today. It's a continual judgment. We hope to make the right judgment. And hopefully our discussion today will lead us into a different arena of judgment. So John, would you read Matthew 7, 1 through 29? Matthew 7, 1 through 29, and it's page 60, page 60, starting at the bottom left-hand column. You're in the harmony. Okay.
Chapter 7, verse 1. Do not judge, or you will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How could you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and then turn and tear you to pieces. Ask, and it will be given you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door will be open. Which of you, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask? So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction. And many enter through it, but small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, and a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruits, you will recognize them. Now, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, do we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had a foundation on the rock. But everyone who bears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. Jesus had finished saying these things. The crowds were amazed at his teachings because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teacher of the law.
Well, I would imagine, since those people had never heard anything like this, on that day, they went home with a lot to think about, a lot to talk about. I'm gonna kind of skip around before we come to the judgment and other things, or judging, not the judging. And we'll talk about the narrow gate. What comes to your mind on the narrow gate? What's he talking about here? What do you think he's referring to? Where is he going with this? Anyone have a thought? John?
Don't follow the crowds.
Sorry.
Don't follow the crowds.
Yeah.
Ken,
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
It's the heart we're talking about here. And the wide gate lets anything in. The narrow gate lets the heart in.
Thank you, Gordon. Now, we studied early on 6 years ago when we, by the way, for those that are new here, it took 3 years for us to study the life of Jesus the first time, 3.5 years, just to get through the life of Jesus. And we studied about the sheep gate. And when the shepherd would sleep at the gate, it wasn't really a swinging gate a lot of times. The shepherd stayed there, and it was a narrow opening, and he would sleep there, keep the wolves away, and these kind of things. Now, have you ever, I guess where I'm going with this, Roy, is in those days, these people had a lot of baggage to carry. And, you know, the rules and regulations we've talked about over and over and over again in here, and how they felt so guilty probably if they couldn't keep all 613 Sabbath rules. It was a lot of baggage. And so I think about people with backpacks. I don't wear one because of neck issues, but even my brother wears a backpack, you know. And if you've been on a plane when you're trying to get off the plane and everybody's grabbing their stuff up here and the kids are grabbing their backpacks and they're banging into you, you know, it's too narrow in there, first of all. And if you've got 3 backpacks and a bag and this kind of stuff, it really gets crowded. It's a lot of baggage. And to me, you kind of have to throw that backpack away to get through this gate. And even then, you're going to have to go through it sideways sometimes. I wasn't going to bring this up, but my brother, the second year, will have 40,000 people come to Chattanooga next month for his motor car show. See, it's not mine. I don't have time to work it. And there's big auction coming, and it'll be at the Trade Center, and 40,000 people is a lot of folks. And so a couple of years ago, we didn't have it last year because of COVID. They're going to go through with it this year. And I don't want to get too personal about this, but we needed golf carts. We rented every golf cart in Chattanooga. We ran out because people needed to ride from this event to that event. And so we called a certain university not far from here and asked if we could borrow some golf carts. And they said, sure, but you can't use them on Saturday because our name's on them. You can use them Friday and Sunday, but you can't run them on Saturday. You know, as someone who's in the last days of his life, let's say, and living in the latter days, that's a lot of baggage for me. That's a lot of baggage. And I'm not knocking, I love my school. I'm on the board. I defend it. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. But sometimes the baggage, even for me, is a little tight. It's pretty tight for me. And I think Jesus is saying, why don't we just relax a bit? You need to be looking at me, not your traditions. That's what's got you in trouble now. Why don't you look at me in the face? Judge things by me. Just take a broader look at things. It's my opinion. I'm just one sinner up here trying to find my way. But it was hard for me that day to understand. In this lesson, we have a series of two scenarios. And in Matthew 7, 1 through 6, we've got two relationships, one with people and one with God. Another set of twos regarding end time events. We got two gates, two trees, and two builders. A series of two scenarios. One leads on the gates, one leads to destruction, one leads to a life. Two trees, bad trees cut down and thrown into the fire. Two builders, one stands, his house stands, the other isn't. Verse 1 and 2 is about judging. Jesus is referring to someone's motives here for doing something. We're not to judge someone's acts. God alone will decide the final judgment on folks, not me. We're supposed to judge their motives. We can't judge how they're going to end up because they did something wrong. Our life is based on a motive to me. You have in the past passed judgment on people. We all have. Have you ever been wrong? Have you ever been shocked to find out how wrong, what a complete fool you have made of yourself? I think I told you the story about my friend Pryor. 40 years ago, he had 4 kids. I find out he's divorced. For years, I thought he'd left his wife and 4 kids. What a jerk. So I sort of pushed him away from me. Then I'm in my attorney's office a few years later. I see Pryor walk through. I said, "Do you represent him?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, why would that guy leave a wife and 4 kids?" He said, "Honey, you didn't get good information, did you?" So what are you talking about? His wife was having an affair down the street with a dentist. She left him. I represented him. What? You mean all these years I was judging this guy? We really have to be, we form opinions. We have to be very, very careful sometimes. There's a woman that I know that she's really eccentric, and I judge her to be a little bit of a problem for me. And yesterday I found out about her history, her childhood, sexually abused, stepmother after stepmother after stepmother, abusive to her. I admire her now. In 24 hours, I admire this woman. She's lucky to even be here. And I went from this nutcase over here to somebody that I really now sort of admire. I don't need to be judging anybody. I need to get the facts. And the one thing I think we're saying here is if you're constantly bad-mouthing somebody, then when hard times come, you're going to get what you deserve. Yes, sir.
Over the years, I've noticed that problems that I might have in my own life, if I think about them, I'm aware they're a problem, but do I really fix them? No. So when I see somebody else that has that problem, I've learned about it, I want to tell them about it. Not me, I want to tell them about the problem.
Yeah.
And more recently, because people keep whispering in my ear, filters, okay? More recently, I have started thinking about it in terms of, okay, if I'm willing to share my problem, then I can share with them my understanding of it.
Yeah.
And that's a little hard.
Any thoughts? Any thoughts from any folks out there? I know you've never judged anyone, so this might probably a whole new learning experience for you. Keith, ever judged a student? Been wrong about the student? It's happened.
Many times.
Anything come to mind, or you just? I had a student the other day that came to me through another person that I judged wrong. And gosh, we can't help our young people. But anyway.
Ken,
Yes.
sometimes we are more sensitive to faults in others that we also recognize in ourselves. And so if I'm particularly sensitive about a certain issue, then I will see that issue in other people too. And I like to blame them then, because that justifies me a little bit. And so I think a lot of times the things that we see in others that are a problem are particularly issues for ourselves.
That was, yeah, John.
What I'm finding out more and more lately is people don't appreciate my criticism.
You're kidding.
I don't know, it seems like people change lately.
Any particular person close to you, Mike? Yes.
I think you hit on it when you talk about intent. I can be critical of you, and I feel very comfortable being critical of you if my intent is to lift you up and to help you and to help you be better. That takes courage to do that. That's hard. The other thing is, it says, don't judge unless you be judged. Okay. And some things in life, I'm going to draw the line in the sand. I'm not walking over the line. I don't think I have substance unless I'm willing to take that risk and have the courage and convictions to do that. And that's okay. Judge me on that. Lest I be judged. Yeah, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to judge you poorly and then do the same thing. But I do believe that part of my intent, if I'm going to be a good citizen, is to try to set some kind of a standard that, and maybe judgment flips into this somewhere, I'm not sure.
There is.
But my intent is not if my intent is not self-serving, but selfless, that makes a difference. And if my judgment's wrong, I can live with it if that's my intent.
Yeah. If you really care about this person or this school or this body of people, and you know they're making a mistake, and you sit there, you don't want to say anything, you sort of sometimes have to wade in and take a little bit of a risk. I've had two daughters. I know about wading in at the wrong time when they're teenagers. I learned a lot. It's just time you walk away and hope for the best. And the best has happened with me. But, it's natural to criticize. And I can prove it. Jerry Arnold proved it to me this week. Have a comment?
I want to hear this.
It is natural. And it's an inborn issue that we all must face. And I'm glad we can judge and sort it. We have to be able to judge to stay healthy. Emotionally, physically, But Jerry Arnold went to, I guess, it's falling over here, it's Collegedale Academy now, isn't it? I think. Yes. And so they changed that. And I should know that, I got 3 grandkids over. So he was speaking to the 6th grade class, 30 kids, my twins' age, my grandsons. He picked up a pulpit, he brought it around, and he said, let's imagine this is a person. This is a classmate. Describe this classmate to me. It said, doesn't have any arms, has no legs. It's a very strange shape. I said, now remember, this is a person. So I kept talking about everything it didn't do. They didn't talk about how beautiful the wood finish was, or the wonderful service, the service that this structure used for a pastor. They naturally criticized it. It was odd, it was weird. Now, maybe that doesn't resonate with you, but it kind of did with me. It's a natural thing. And that's where we get in trouble sometimes. I bought a book. I'm talking a lot this morning because I thought this would be an easy class to talk to you about because there's so much, but it was hard to synthesize it down, break it down to get the really strong points. They're all strong points. We had to pick and choose this morning about what we're really going to talk about because we can't talk about this and this and this. Yeah. Keith, go ahead.
I'd like to reemphasize what John had stated, because as teachers, we are continually judging our students to help them advance. And we have to make sure that's selfless versus selfish. And sometimes you just want to hit them with a 2x4, but we have to make sure that our judging is at the right method, and that's the tough stuff. So I just want to make sure that John's comments were reiterated.
Somebody, I should even bring this up. A teacher came to me about a university, about a student they had, and I think in 4th grade. I'm not going to go there. It's a great kid. He needed some help. He got it. I thought he was just hanging around. He went from an F to an A because he had a little help from someone. He was working 3 jobs and trying to send money home. I was wrong. Yeah.
I think that judgment many times is perception, and that it's all messed up, and then somebody says something about somebody and like, okay, you can't want to take that as truth. Well, that might not be truth. That might be perception. So it's just like, don't even go there. But if you want to go there, you can do one-on-one with a person and try to filter this or figure it out. But it's tough.
It is tough.
Look at it like this, like do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Oftentimes we think of that in the context of something negative. Think of it in the context of something positive. Do unto others as you'd have. If I do something good for you, I don't expect anything, but the chances of somebody doing something good for me probably increases because I'm modeling a certain behavior. And so even when you are, let's call it critical, for lack of better words, let's not look at that as negative. I am trying to encourage somebody to really realize their great potential, for them to realize it. So if you spin it in terms of good, that might be helpful for the goal to do.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say that my job involves seeing clients every day. And when I see a person walk in, first thing you do is you look and you kind of size them up. I don't really like the word judge, period. I like the word evaluate. Because every single day, every moment basically of our lives, we have to evaluate what people do and what the world is going in the world is going on. And then when I see this person, I'm thinking, why on earth is this person here? What could possibly be the issue? And when I listen to amazingly wonderful, tragic stories, I know, and it is an amazing joy to meet these people.
Wow.
And listen to their stories.
Thank you so much. Did you hear that? Could you hear that?
No, we couldn't hear.
Couldn't hear it. Wonderful story anyway. Judge everything. I've got a driveway with a lot of trees that grow. Some of the trees are probably 100 years old. One tree became very unhealthy. I judged that tree that it needed to come down. Made an evaluation. And this isn't going to make or break your week, but it was just kind of amusing to me about judging things. I bought this book the other day called, I don't normally buy this kind of book. I'm a history of the hidden lives of trees. I was bored. I read all the history I wanted to read for a little while, and so I got it. In the great forest in Europe, a mature tree there is 400 years old, not 100 years old. Like mature tree in the United States is 100 years old. They're 400. They don't cut them at 400. So in this book, it talks about when a tree gets sick, the other trees come to its aid through the root system. They decide which tree will live and which won't. They judge that tree to be sick. Root systems are intertwined. They start feeding it sugar. What else, Keith? Fungi, was that what I read? They start taking care of that tree. Has been sick for 10 years, yet it won't die. The other trees judged it to be worth it. They're keeping it alive. And it's beat up and it's ragged, but yet it lives on because of its neighbors. They judge it. Yes.
I think we're using the word judge rather loosely here. I think perhaps better words might be evaluate or assess. For instance, we assess the progress of our students.
Yeah.
We assess or we evaluate the condition of the tree and to make informed decision based upon our assessment. So I think we've been using the word judge rather loosely here.
Yeah. Thank you, Ruth. I think the word judge around a college campus or around any kind of campus with kids, to judge them would be a tough word. In the faculty meetings, I can assure you, that might be tough. I think I like evaluate, but we'll move on. Yes.
I was thinking about this in the context of the Great Commission, not Great Commission, the Great Commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. So if we meet people, everybody has problems. Some are physical, some are emotional, some are just cleanliness. It doesn't matter what it is. If we love them as a child of God, in our hearts, we should be thinking about them that way. Thinking about, is there anything that I'm being impressed to do for that person? That's not always easy, but like the lady that had the hair growing out of her mole,
Yeah.
You were not really drawn to her, but you see someone like that, you might just naturally go up and walk and talk to them.
Sure.
A lot of people you meet are not socially competent, and they're lonely, and if nothing else, they just want someone to care.
Yeah. But see, I'm too busy to do that, Gordon. You'll have to get someone else to do it. I can't do it.
Okay,
So that's the problem.
I'm judging you.
You're judging. Let's talk about our prayer life. Whoa. That's a good one. Let's talk about that. Matthew 7 through 11 is about our prayer life. Ask and you'll get it. Seek or look and you'll find it. Knock and the door opens. Everyone who asks receives. These are pretty lofty statements. Very lofty. And somehow we interpret them, I think, a little bit different than what Jesus was really trying to drive home that day. I think God is saying here, I know this is pretty lofty, but I'm willing to help you get there if you'll talk to me. We're given that prayer model. This is a model for prayer. Ask, knock, these kind of things. These are models. Ask. If your prayer is answered, is it always answered exactly the way you wanted it? Has that happened to you? I'm in trouble here, Lord. I really need help. Can you get me across the finish? Yeah, you were picturing it this way, but it came a different way. Years ago, when I was trying to get my business on its feet, I was really struggling, and I'm flipping around one night. This is 25 years ago and 30 years ago, and I hit the channel with the religion, whatever they call it, the inspiration channel or something back then. I don't know. And I was trying to get through that as fast as I could. And so all of a sudden there was this evangelist there, and he said, yeah, I was in real trouble. So I stopped because I was in real trouble. And he said, I was trying to have an evangelistic thing going on the radio. I got so in debt to the radio station that I couldn't pay the rest. So I mortgaged my house. I'm about to lose my house. And so there was this mentor he had he'd never met. He wanted to be a mentor, but he was a big time evangelist. And he said, I was in a meeting and I got the chance to go talk to him, and it didn't work out like I thought. I sat down, I told him who I was. He said, I know who you are. Just like that. He said, you're in a lot of trouble, son. He said, you're in debt up to your eyeballs. I was thinking, how does he know that? He said, you're going to lose your house. He said, how would you know that? He said, here's your problem. You don't know how to pray. If you're going to be in this kind of business, you need to pray for a harvest. Stop praying, get a paycheck every week to pay, plug this on. If you're going to be a true evangelist and spread the word of the Lord, you need to pray for a harvest. So we did. And he expected all of his listeners to come with checks and help him. It didn't happen that way. A guy knocked on his door one day and he said, I'm so-and-so. God told me to bring you this check, but I want you to know, I don't like you. I don't believe in what you're saying. I think you're the last person I would ever help. But God has told me to bring you this check, and there it is. And he turned around and walked out. And he put the guy on his feet. It's well known now. Again, I'm doing a lot of talking, but this is just coming from years of what I've seen and learned. It doesn't always, we don't get exactly what we ask for, but we get help. So let me put it to you this way. Sometimes we're afraid to ask for things. And it was told to me recently, when you were growing up, did you have that special mom or dad or grandmother or grandfather, and you were always asking them for something, and they usually gave you something?
Oftentimes different than what you asked.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't afraid to ask them. Now, they might not have given it to you every time, or they might not have given you exactly what you wanted. They gave you what was best for you, but you weren't afraid to ask. And I'll tell you this, I'm supposed to be a promoter and a developer. I cringe at the idea of knocking on somebody's door trying to sell them something. I hate that. Why is it that I'm afraid to knock on that door? And this is the key to the whole thing. Why am I afraid to knock on that door?
They told no.
That's right. I'm afraid I'll be told no. And I don't know these people. What would they help me? Because I don't know them. I don't have a relationship with them. So I'm reluctant to go ask them because I don't know. It's really hard to ask for something from somebody that you don't know. Yes.
Many, many years ago, and I have a lot of many years ago, I remember doing in-gathering. What I found was if I went to the average person's home,
Yeah.
they would give me some.
Yeah.
If I went to a really nice home, kind of wealthy, they would just shut the door in your face.
Why is that? Why would they do that? I can tell they can relate to your issues. They've been there.
Yeah.
Seek and you'll find. Seek. It means persistence. It doesn't mean obsessing just on one thought or one request. Seeking righteousness. It's a person that lingers in the presence of God. It's hard for us to linger. Oh, I was going to ask you one question. When you got your prayer answered, did you pray as much being thankful as you were when you were in trouble? Did day after day, did you thank God for bailing out? Did you pray as hard for that as you did when you were in trouble and you got bailed out? Probably not. You were moving on to the next deal when you got in trouble. Our memories are short when it comes to prayers being answered. I don't think I've ever prayed as hard for a thank you prayer as when I'm in a crisis. And these are just thoughts that roll through my mind as we go through this. Seeking righteousness. It's not about seeking a new car or seeking a new home or seeking. He's talking about seeking a lifestyle of righteousness. Lingering.
Ken,
Yes. Danny.
is there not something here that we may be missing? You know, if you look at, especially men, sorry, ladies, but if you look at men, we're supposed to be the leaders of our home, the providers. Everyone says, hey, look at Danny, he can ride a bike. Hey, look at Danny, he can drive a car. Hey, he's finished school. And all of these successful things for us as men to go to someone's door and knock on it, to ask for something is a humbling experience.
Yeah.
I feel like it's something we're having to basically get down on our knees and say, look, I've failed here. I need something from someone. And I think that's very hard for men to do.
I think you're right. And it comes to a lot of us when you have hit the wall. That's where a lot of guys finally get to the point. Did you have your hand up?
I did, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I
I'm sure
think
this will be short.
one of the key things is what Pastor Jerry always says in his closing prayer. According to your will.
Yeah.
When he's praying to God.
That's the hard prayer. That's the very difficult little piece to add on to the end, according to your will. I don't know, it's what I want.
Yeah.
Even Jesus, when he was praying in the garden, he was praying for his Father. Is there another way? But nevertheless, thy will be done.
Yeah.
So he submitted to his Father. It's a hard lesson to learn, but we need to get to know him as our Father. Submitting is better judgment.
A lot of us, I'm finding out, did not have good parents. I did. And I asked for a lot of stuff, and I didn't quite get it. I didn't get it most of the time. But I got what I needed. I got what was appropriate. Yes.
Yeah, I think one of the keys to growing in Christian life is finding out what you need to ask for. And one of the texts says, seek God with all your heart and he will reward you. And so, and that doesn't mean he will reward you materially. That doesn't mean he will reward you in any other way. Then if you're seeking God, the reward is you'll find God. And so it's what you're asking for. And unfortunately, when we're all wrapped up in our material world, we're often asking for material things. Or even we're asking for healing, or we're asking for this or that, rather than relationship and rather than knowing God. If we ask God to reveal himself to us and to be close to us, I can't believe that that won't be answered.
I think you're right. Yes.
Well, I think one of the keys is to ask. Even though your ask might be wrong, at least you're thinking to ask. Oftentimes, I think I ask for things to make my life easier, and life isn't easy. Life is really hard. There's people sitting in this room right now. Somebody's going through some really hard times. And I think the key is to ask. I remember when the night my wife dropped dead unexpectedly. I had a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old. And my prayer was to take the next year away. I don't want to go through this next year. Just take the next year away from me. After that time, I'll get some traction. You know, my daughters that lost their mother, I just want the year taken away. He did. He took the next year away. Now, it was 20 years ago. Back in my mind, I can hardly remember anything in that year. The Father took it away. And I had to live it. You know, I had to cry. I had to go through all the crap that you go through when that stuff happens. But he took it away. I think to ask, even if your ask isn't quite right, you know, the Father will spin it so it's right. Just ask.
Thank you, John. Across the page on page 60, in Luke 6:36, it says, be merciful. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Let's talk about that for a minute and how easy it is at times to be merciful, that we don't really even understand. And so there's this, you can call it the Holy Spirit, you can call it a still small voice, you can call it intuition, you can call it being impressed. I've been impressed at times. I want to tell you 2 Waffle House stories. That's my center of learning, the Waffle House years ago, where I got all the intellectuals in my life. I will say that some of the best deals I've ever done have been done on a napkin with a pen. And I would talk to somebody and I would say, oh, stuff it in my coat pocket. And then things would happen on a napkin. Don't think that everybody that's built something went to Georgia Tech or, you know, most ideas and things don't happen that way at all. I mean, it's on a napkin in most cases. These are 2 Waffle House stories that I want to share with you. Starting about what year is this? The decades have flown by. 95. I'm in the Waffle House on Shalford Road, reading the paper. There's a picture of a lady in a hospital bed that has been put in her house. And it's a big spread on the front page about MS. This lady has MS. And her little 6-year-old is up in the bed with her, with his arm around her. And her husband is standing there beside the bed. And these are the people I grew up with. This guy's got the blue uniform on. I mean, he's a truck driver. He's a factory. These are my people. This is where I came from. This guy's working from week to week, paycheck to paycheck. I relate to this. I had never really given much of anything in my life, and it was talking about MS, and I was looking at that picture, and I drink my coffee, and I put it down, and I kept picking it up, and I kept putting it down, something about that picture. So I called the number in the paper, and I said, hey, this very uncomfortable doing this, very uncomfortable. I said, just read this story, and I saw the picture, and I stumbling around here, the phone, okay? And I said, I wouldn't mind talking to you about, maybe I could do something for this lady and the little boy. She said, well, what we do, we ask you to contribute, and it goes into a fund. And I said, I'm not interested in that. If you find a way that I could possibly help this family, that would be great. Gave her my number, got about it. Week later, phone rings, lady from MS. He says, there is one thing, if you're still interested, you could do. And I'm thinking, what's this gonna cost me? And she says, this lady only has health care like 4 hours a day. And they leave her food in a tray on her hospital bed. And she's getting very weak. And it seems we found out that roaches are getting up on her tray in her food, and she really can't do much about it. So would you be willing to hire an exterminator to come to her house? I said, you mean like $20 a month? Is that what you're talking about? The price of a pizza, a couple of pizzas? She said, yes, sir, that's what I'm talking. Surely I can pull that off. Surely I can do this. With all the things we waste, surely God can help this person. And I made sure for the rest of her life she didn't live in that filth and squalor. She died just a few months later. That was my first instance of giving, of finding a little mercy. Just a little mercy. That $20 began to change my life. And you give all this money and you do this, you don't know where it went. That one act of mercy was huge for me. Now, let's talk about the real story here. The Waffle House story. Judging people. I want to read you a story about Bob. 6 pages. We've got just enough time. And for those that came today, I'm not looking for a big theological uplifting. I've told you over and over, you're not going to get it in this class. We're just trying to help you get from this Saturday to next Friday and be as good a person as you can. For many years, each morning, I would start the day off at the Waffle House on Shelterford Road across from the mall. It gave me a chance to have a cup of coffee and read the paper before I began my day. All this was going fine until about 20 years ago, when one morning I was sitting in my favorite stool, and this older, skinny, tall, balding man had the dark glasses. He weighed about 100 pounds. He was probably, he was about 6'4". You know, his hair was, he was going bald. You know, I'm judging the guy already. And his dentures didn't fit. He was clicking around a little bit. And he walks in. And the waitress says, what are you having this morning, Bob? And he says, the same GD thing I have every effing morning when I come in here. I want a bacon and egg and a whole something, and I want no mayo, and I want lettuce and tomato. Wow. The waitress smiled, and this was apparently just another routine day for Bob. He was somewhat loud, somewhat rude, and I quickly decided I didn't like this guy, and hopefully would be finishing each morning before he arrived. Somehow he began to show up each morning just when I would be sitting down. And each morning he seemed to be getting one stool closer. And it was the same routine everyone. I want this blankety. And so I began to notice he'd be smiling and would he be saying these things, these terrible things to the workers. And this was apparently his crude way of being sociable. Finally, the dreaded day arrives and he's sitting next to me. Finally, the dreaded day arrives that he's sitting next to me. He comes in and sits down and looks at me and says, "Hi." And I turn with my paper in hand, look over, and reluctantly say hello. Not much is said at first, but soon we begin to talk about what, I don't remember. But I find out after a few mornings, he and his wife of many years are separated. I sense he's very unhappy, frustrated, and not well physically. I soon learn he has 2 daughters and a stepson. The daughters are married and live here in Chattanooga. I don't know where the stepson was. I also begin to sense that this old guy is smart, and I don't mean bright. I mean highly intelligent. And little did I know just how intelligent he was. We began to discuss places where he's lived, which has been everywhere, Europe, the Middle East. He said he was a consultant and been recently consulting at Oak Ridge with the nuclear boys. That kind of give you a little idea just how bright this guy is. He's a nuke. A couple of weeks go by and we now have a standing date each morning, and he's very interesting and fun to talk to about the stock market. That's when day trading began to hit. He's one of the first day traders I ever met, John. He comes in one morning depressed. His cat's died. He keeps saying, "I can't believe I was so attached to that old cat, but I miss him." He's ready to break down, and I change the subject. Bob is changing. Each morning he's becoming more thoughtful, nicer, easier to deal with. He's poking fun at this black lady that's cooking. And at times she turns around and says, "Shut up, Bob. I don't have to cook for you." And the place just explodes in laughter. A few mornings pass. Bob suddenly starts talking about his wife. And he needs to get home and finish a project before she comes home from work. I don't ask about where she's been or what happened, but Bob now is changing for the better. And I mean, he's changing fast. I began to hear what a great wife Bob has, and he tells me how lucky he is and how beautiful his daughters are. He brings me pictures of the family. He tells me stories of how he grew up in Brainerd, Minnesota, how his grandfather was a trapper, and how as a boy he would go out and check the traps in the snow near the Canadian border. He tells me of how a wolf would follow him all day. He would camp at night in the woods. He tells me of how he was deep in the woods and decided to cross a frozen lake one day, and he falls through the lake. And how he has the presence of mind to try to float straight up, so he'll be surfacing at the entry point where he fell through. How he struggled ashore and how he undressed in a sunny area to keep from freezing. This is a boy of 13 years old, out with a wolf. He tells me when he was in the 10th grade of how he worked at a bakery. That bakery baked loaves of bread. It was done with a machine built like a Ferris wheel, and each loaf of bread was sitting in a little seat, and how the machine would break down and how valuable time would be lost. And a repairman would come from across town and the whole system had to be cooled down. He tells me that one day the machine broke and he asked his supervisor if he could fix it. The man says, "If you think you can." Bob tells him to wrap him in wet towels and cool down the system just enough to keep him from burning. The machine is chain driven. He makes the repair. Hardly any time is lost, and the owner of the bakery walks out into the plant not believing what has just happened. He looks at Bob and says, "You have a job here, kid, anytime you want it." He tells me of the great, and this was what blew me away. This one. I'm sitting there with my mouth open. He tells me of the great logging mills in Minnesota and how they would float the logs down this river where he lived, and they would be held in a large holding lake waiting to be loaded. Kids would be hired to count the logs, only most of the time you'd follow the lake while you're counting, and it took forever. Bob tells me of how he went to the boss of that whole operation at the lake and made a deal with him. He asked the man this: "If I can tell you how many logs are in the entire lake right now, would you pay me $10? Now, this is 1940, right? And the man says, "Sure, but that's impossible." Bob says, "I'll have it in the morning." He runs home and gets his mother's old camera, gets a family buddy whose dad has an airplane, and to take him up over the lake. He takes a picture of the logs in the lake. I mean, this is a kid. He goes home and gets his, let's see, his mother works at a Kodak plant. Now there's a dinosaur for you. Kodak. His mother works at the Kodak plant here in Brainerd, Minnesota. He takes his film to his mother. She blows it up poster size. He counts each log in the picture, numbers them, and takes the picture to the man at the lake. The man is flabbergasted and gives Bob $10. Bob's 10 years old. Now think of this. He's 10 years old. One morning, Bob tells me he won't be in for a few days. He's getting some tests. He contracted rheumatic fever as a child and his heart was damaged. Bob is getting weaker each day. I see it, but he's so tough and stubborn and vanishes when he talks. One day I get a call from Bob's wife, who I'd never met. I told Bob that if he went to the hospital to call me. She did. I go down and visit. She's very nice, low-key, lovely lady in her 60s. She leaves so Bob and I can talk. Bob looks horrible. He's on oxygen. I can tell he's glad I came and he wants to talk. So, I mean, what do you talk to somebody about while they're dying? You're just kind of hanging around, you know. And so I'm struggling, and so I finally asked him, how in the world did you become an engineer if you never went to college? And his eyes light up. He motions for me to get more pillows. He says, prop me up. He says, this is an amazing, interesting story. And off we go on the ride of adventures that I never dreamed possible with this old guy. We've run out of time. Oh, thanks. Give me 2 minutes. I'll race through it. Bob married very young to a woman who was a diabetic. He took his first job at an automobile dealership in the parts department, which was in a mess. Bob's other grandfather had been a Packard automobile dealership in the 30s. He trained Bob in the auto dealership. Bob quickly organizes the parts department. The owner's so impressed, he tells Bob to go out and work in the body shop. Bob knew nothing about fenders, paint, anything, wrecked cars. He goes out and takes it over. His wife is pregnant. They lose their first baby due to her diabetic condition. He is constantly fighting hospital bills. Everything he makes, he pays hospital. She keeps having pregnancy issues. In this part of Minnesota, TWA Airlines is becoming of age, and in those days, according to Bob, the pilots ran everything. One day, a pilot comes in with his car, and it's wrecked. Bob repairs it. The pilot loves the work. Soon after that, he calls Bob and says his boss, the chief pilot, has wrecked his car, needs the car fixed fast, like in a week. Bob tells him to bring in the car. Bob fixes it. The pilot's so impressed, he says, bring that guy, I want to take him to dinner. Couldn't believe he could get this done in 3 days. While at the restaurant, the pilots began to talk about a serious problem. They built a runway sinking in the middle. You can't land an airplane like this. So he listens to him. Long story short, Bob says, I can fix it. The guy says, really? He said, yeah, give me 2 concrete trucks in the morning, some high pressure hose, and we'll get it fixed. So he goes out there. They put the hoses in the ground. They start pumping, the hose blows out. Pilot goes crazy. Bob said, I told you I wanted high pressure hose. These aren't. So the pilot orders those hoses brought in, start pumping. Runway starts coming up. And the pilot says, will this hold? And the other engineers around say, it will. We just didn't think we could, we didn't think about this. So he looks at Bob and he says, I need you to fix the rest of the runway. And Bob says, what will you pay me? And he says, what do you want? Bob tells him, and the pilot says, you're crazy. I'm not paying it. He said, well, then you fix it yourself. So they already, so the bottom line is, Bob, they cut a deal. Pilot's walking away and says, look, if anybody asks you this, I could get fired for paying you this kind of, tell them you're a consulting engineer. You work directly for me, you report to me, okay? Bob says, can I put that on my resume? And the pilot, and of course, on a crude way I can't repeat, he says, I don't care where you put it. You can put it. You can figure it out the rest. The runway's fixed. From that point on in Bob's life, he's a consulting engineer for TWA. He goes to Saudi Arabia, builds for Amoco with his chief pilot. He quits his job and takes Bob with him. Bob does the thinking, the chief pilot gets all the credit. They go to Europe. They end up at Nassau in the 60s, building launching pads for rockets. Chief pilot gets all the credit. Bob gets a lot of money. Bob does all the thinking. There's a lot more about Bob, but the point is, I had judged Bob wrong. There's 4 more pages about Bob here. He was an amazing guy, but I judged him, and I judged him wrong. I evaluated him wrong.
Hey, in all fairness, he probably judged you wrong too, Kim.
So in everything you do unto others what you would have them do to you. This sums up the law and the prophets. Boy, would you have our prayer?
Certainly. Loving Father in heaven, we're so grateful that you accept us as we are, and that we can be made new and fresh each and every day by your grace. We ask that the Holy Spirit be with us and guide us and teach us and show us your way. And may you go with each one here today as they continue their worship in spirit and truth. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. See you next week.
Yeah, I don't